이번 주에도 돌아온 한국어 영어 반반 팟캐스트 하프앤하프의 정태용입니다. 반갑습니다.
And I'm Katrina Owen from Half and Half. Welcome.
7월에도 돌아왔는데요. 카트리나님께서 이번에 얘기할 주제도 카트리나가 직접 고르셨죠?
Yeah, I was thinking we've both had a lot of different jobs. And I think the approach that we've taken to get those different jobs was probably different. Not just different because I'm in Norway or have worked in the US and you're in Korea and the cultures and sort of systems are different, but also because with so many different jobs, we must have had a lot of different approaches. Even just you might have had different approaches to getting different jobs that you've done, and same for me. So I thought it could be interesting.
네, 맞아요. 근데 그 job이라는 단어가 그 한국어로 얘기하면 직업인데
It's a little bit broader in English, the way I'm thinking about
그렇죠.
it.
예, 그쵸.
Yeah.
맞아요.
So it might be a part-time job. It might be a full-time job. It might be part of your career. Like you're actually serious about
네네.
progressing in that job.
네.
Yeah.
그러니까 뭐 굳이 뭐 어떤 그 인생의 직업을 생각해서 뭐 어떤 회사에 들어가는 것만을 얘기하는 건 아니라는 거죠.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
네, 좋습니다. 그래서 혹시 이 에피소드를 하고 싶다고 생각했을 때 특별히 그 이유를 떠올리게 한 어떤 그 일자리 같은 게 있었나요?
Yeah, when we were doing the first recording, we were talking about GitHub at some point, that I've worked at GitHub. And I can't remember how it was phrased or how we mentioned it, but the way that I have gotten my programming jobs has not been through the standard process where you send a resume and a cover letter to a company that that they've never heard of you, and then you do an interview, and then you get hired or you don't. My process for getting jobs in the I guess programming jobs has been quite different to that.
그렇죠. 근데 그러니까 카트리나의 프로그래밍 그 자리를 얻게 된 이야기들이 이게 일반적인 프로그래밍 필드에 있는 사람들이 일자리를 찾는 그 길이랑 많이 다르다는 거잖아요.
Sort of. Sometimes.
달랐다는 거.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of the people that I know probably have a similar process to how I got jobs in the last few jobs that I got. It was usually, I feel like I'm jumping ahead here. So I think it's not so different to many other people in some ways. I think it's not something that is unique to me. Definitely.
그렇구나.
Yeah.
알겠습니다. 그냥 아까 이 질문을 드린 이유는 아무래도 좀 기터브 출신의 프로그래머가 어떻게 직업을 기터브에 취직을 했는지
Right.
좀 그 팁 같은 거를 듣고 싶어 하는 사람이 있을까 봐.
Yeah.
아마 근데 좀 다른 이야기를 듣게 될 수도 있다. 그 말을.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to start there and work backwards because I feel like there might, if I'm going to look at it more systematically, there were sort of three approaches that I've taken to getting jobs. The first one was before I became a programmer and I was doing all sorts of, not programming jobs. So it could be very random part-time jobs or more like working in an office but not as a programmer type jobs. And then there's the when I first started working as a programmer and I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anybody. And so there's how I went about getting jobs at that point. And then about when was this? 13 years ago, 14 years ago, I started speaking at conferences. And so I would travel to different countries and I would stand on stage and talk about programming to an audience. And after I started doing that, my approach to getting new jobs was quite different because then people started knowing who I was.
좋습니다. 그러면 시간 순서대로 그 세 파트를 한번 쭉 훑어볼까요?
Yeah. And then we can also talk about how that compares to like jobs that you've applied to or processes or how things work in Korea as well.
네, 네.
Cool.
그렇게 해보죠.
Awesome. Let's do it.
네, 이거 되게 가치 있는 이야기인 것 같아요. 왜냐면 프로그래밍을 20년 하고 기터브에서 일을 한 프로그래머도 프로그래밍이랑 전혀 상관없는 그 일을 한 경험들이 심지어 꽤 많았다는 게
Yeah.
되게 많은 사람들한테 용기를 줄 수 있지 않을까?
Yeah.
이런 생각이 들거든요.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. So before I became a programmer, I did a lot of part-time jobs. Like and some of them were quite random. That, you know, I might work at a youth camp during the summer where there were activities for children, or at one point I was part of an acting troupe in France, and I was on stage doing
네.
a play for a couple years, on and off. What else did I do?
아니,
Yeah.
제가 이해하는 게 맞다면 그 공연 같은 걸 했단 말이에요? 연극 공연 같은 걸?
Yeah.
아 진짜요? 상상도 못했네.
Yeah. It's super random. This was long before I decided to go to university and get a degree and even had the idea of doing any programming. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I worked in restaurants and in bars. I did serving, like you know, a lot of people do. What else did I do? I was those double-decker red buses that drive around, hop on, hop off, visit the city type tour buses.
네.
Yeah, I worked as they called it a hostess on tour buses to help people buy tickets and like answer questions that people had. So lots and lots of really super random. Oh, and I did a lot of secretarial work. I was, because I could speak French and English, and I could type in both French and English, I would get like receptionist jobs or like part-time reception, vacation replacement. If someone was going on vacation for 5 weeks, they might call a company, an office, it's called a temp agency, temp being short for temporary work. And this is back before the internet was much of a thing. And so they would call the agency and say, we need someone for 5 weeks and it's this type of work. Do you have someone? And then they would call me or someone else and say, hey, do you want to work at this law firm or whatever for 5 weeks? I'd be like, sure.
근데 그거는 시간이 좀 지난 일이죠.
Yeah, this is
그때는.
Yeah. So this is in the 90s, the late 90s and the early 2000s for about 10 years.
아, 90년대 후반부터 2000년대 초반. 2000년대 초. 그거를 뭐 용역 회사라고 하나? 아마.
I don't know. Yeah.
아마 그럴 거예요. 근데 아니 이게 진짜 다른 느낌이긴 한데.
Right.
그 한국에 그 노가다 알아요? 노가다?
No, I've never heard of it.
아니 그 건물 짓고
Oh yeah.
막 공사하고 막 그런 일들 있잖아요. 근데 그러면은 그 노가다 용역 사무소가 있어요.
And so it would be only for construction type jobs. So if you're looking for part-time or temporary short contract work, you would go to that office. Yeah, it's the same thing though. For my case, it was mostly office work.
아, 노가다 용역 회사의 사무직 버전.
Right.
아, 그렇구나.
Yeah. Though now it would all happen online, I'm sure.
그렇죠. 이제는 다 온라인으로 바뀌었죠.
Yeah. So how about you? Did you do any part-time work?
저는 많이 했죠.
Yeah.
뭐 저는 아직 30대 초반이라 뭐 비교적 다양한 아르바이트와 일을 해보긴 했지만 그래도 막 그렇게 경험이 오래된 건 아닌데
Right.
제가 성인이 되고 처음 아르바이트를 구할 때부터 이미 그 인터넷으로 다 되어 있었어요.
Okay.
근데 한국이 특히 인터넷이 좀 빠르게 발전해서 그런 것 같기도 한데
Right.
네,
Yeah, in France-
한국에는 네,
In France, it took a while for the internet to really take off because they already had a system from way back when called Minitel. So it was like a text-only, black screen. I want to say green letters, but it was probably white. But it was connected to the phone system, and you could do text-only conversations,
네.
which was great. Like if you're hard of hearing or deaf, but you could it also had services where you could search for things, and so a lot of people. It took a while to get used to using, like for people to even feel like they needed the internet because Minitel did a lot of what they needed.
미니텔이 일부 기능을 하고 있었기 때문에 인터넷이 필요가 없었던 상황인 거예요.
In the beginning, it feels like that's one of the reasons why the internet took a little bit longer, I think, to take off in France than it would have in Korea.
아, 그렇구나. 흥미롭네요. 그 부분도.
Yeah.
네, 아무튼 저는 그래서 20살 한국 나이로 한국 에이지 시스템으로 그 20살
Right.
20살이 되고 그러니까 고등학교 졸업하고 나서 네, 그렇게 인터넷 아르바이트 사이트라고 해야 되나?
Right.
근데 딱 카트리나가 얘기한 그 용역 회사의 인터넷 버전이에요.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
네, 근데 거기에는 별의별 알바가 다 있어요. 거기에 모든
네.
알바가.
Yeah. And so what
네,
kind of
뭐-
work did you do?
저도 식당도 해보고 카페 알바도 해보고 빵집 알바도 해보고 그리고 이런 서비스업 말고도 아니 뭐 대부분이 서비스업이었는데
Yeah.
네, 골프 연습장 알바도 해보고
And what did you do there?
근데 그 골프 연습장이 진짜 그 넓은 골프 필드가 아니라
Okay.
어떻게 설명해야 되지? 그 3층짜리 건물이 이렇게 있고
Uh-huh.
그 건물 이 건물 옆에 그 그물망이 이렇게 넓게 있는 거예요.
Okay.
그래서 이 그물이 되게 넓어요, 이 망이.
Right.
그러면 이 건물 안에서 사람들이 이 저 그물 끝으로 골프 스윙을 하는 거죠.
So wait, they were in the building and then shooting
네.
the ball out onto the field?
네.
That's pretty cool.
네, 네. 그러면은 이 그물이 또 이렇게 경사가 져 있거든요.
Right. Yeah. And so all the balls
그래서-
would roll down and be easy to collect at the bottom.
그쵸, 그쵸.
And what was your
그래서
job? Collecting
이렇게 막
the
삽으로
balls?
막 이렇게 아니 뭐 저는 주로 그 데스크에서 저도
오케이.
리셉션니스트였죠, 사실상.
Yeah.
그래서 뭐 그 회원 뭐 한 달 회원권 끊고 오는 사람들
Mm-hmm.
그 막 이제 누가 누군지 알아보면서 그 오면 공 주고 막
Yeah.
그런 일 하고 뭐 네, 재밌었죠.
Yeah.
가끔 빠르게 얘기하자면 가끔 그 그물이 높다 그물이 있다 했잖아요, 멀리.
Right.
근데 가끔씩 진짜 왠지 모르겠는데 저 그물 저 멀리에 골프 공이 자기들끼리 안 내려오고 모여서 이렇게 막 뭉쳐 있을 때가 있어요.
Right.
그러면은 제가 그 그물을 그냥 밟고 올라가서 삽 들고 올라가서 아니면 그냥 맨손으로 장갑 끼고 가서
Right.
그 그물에 쌓여 있는 공들을 막 퍼내요.
Right.
예, 근데 그 그물이잖아요. 그러면 그물 밑에 바닥이 보여요.
Ah,
네.
interesting.
네,
And so-
네.
But you could walk on it.
네.
Yeah.
걸을 수는 있어요.
Yeah.
근데 그것도 진짜 재밌는 게 그물이 이렇게 경사가 져 있는데
Uh-huh.
이렇게 제가 딱 시작하는 부분은 그 그물이 팽팽해서
Uh-huh.
그냥 바닥 같거든요.
Right.
근데 위쪽으로 올라갈수록 그물이 좀 흐물흐물해져서 제 몸이 한 걸음 걸을 때마다 푹푹 빠져요. 이렇게.
So was it scary? Was it hard?
진짜 무섭죠.
Right. Are you afraid of
진짜.
heights in general?
네.
Oh, yeah. Me too, a
너무
little bit.
무서워요.
Yeah.
네. 그리고 그 그물 밑에는 주차장이 있거든요.
What is that?
주차장.
Oh, like parking?
네, 네.
Yeah. Okay.
그래서 밑에는 차들이 막 저 밑에 막 있고.
Yeah.
그래서
And
무서웠어요.
so the field,
네.
were there specific
네.
places that you were trying to aim at? Like was this just to practice? What was the goal? Like if it's just a sort of inclined net, how do you
네.
know if you're getting better?
그냥 이제 거리를 그 하는 거죠.
Okay,
멀리
so-
보내는 거.
Got it. Okay, so it's distance practice. I see.
네.
So it's not precision. It's not like if you're on an actual golf course and you go like too far, that's not good either. If you go the right distance but too far to the left or the right, that's not good either.
그쵸.
So this was really just working on being able to hit for
네. 뭐 그랬던 것 같은데. 저도 골프 전문가는 아니라.
yeah. Anyway, I'm
예,
now
확실하지
off topic,
않습니다.
but that's
아무튼 예.
interesting.
근데 되게 재밌는 일화라.
Yeah.
네, 그런 것도 해보고 예전에는 코로나 사태가 터졌을 때
Mhm.
그 큰 병원에서 엄청 큰 병원에서 입구에 사람들 들어올 때 그 열 재고
Oh, really?
네네 사람들
Yeah.
열 재고
Yeah.
그 뭐 이름이랑 뭐
Yeah.
방문 목적 이런 거 적게 하는 그런 알바도 했었어요.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that seems like something that they would probably do in a lot of places, not just hospitals.
맞아요.
Yeah.
그래서
Huh.
그 일도
Yeah.
재밌게 했죠.
Yeah.
뭐 아무튼 그래서 저는 근데 이거 말고도 얘기 안 한 알바가 더 많은데
Same.
예.
Yeah. Yeah.
네.
So then, have you ever had a job where you went through a sort of more structured application process, like you would do for a more normal office type job?
그렇게 사무실에서 일하는 일은 딱 한 번 해봤거든요.
Okay.
근데 제가 이 지역에 이 시청, 구청, 군청 같은 이걸 한국 정부의 사무소 같은 것들인데,
Okay.
네, 뭐 여권 만들고
오케이.
네, 사람들이 자기 아이디 카드 만들고 그런 곳들이 있잖아요.
Right. So it's some type
네.
of public office, like it's a government-run office
네.
where you would get these services.
네, 네, 맞아요.
Okay.
뭐 카운티 홀 이런 건가?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
네, 그런 곳에서 저는 군 생활을 대신 거기서 일을 했거든요.
Oh, okay. Yeah. In
네.
Norway, they used to have those options. If you for some reason couldn't do your military service, there were
네.
public civil services that you could do as well.
네, 네. 네, 궁금해하실 구독자님들을 위해 말씀드리자면 저는 중고등학생 때 폐수술을 여러 번 받아서
Oh my gosh.
네, 네. 그래서 네, 저는 전혀 불법적인 게 아니라
No, you had a good
정당한-
reason. That's for sure.
네, 네. 정당한 이유로
Yeah.
네, 그렇게 공익 생활을 하고 네, 그리고 그게 끝날 때쯤에 그런 시청, 구청, 군청 이런 곳에 공무원들만 일을 하는 게 아니라
Mm-hmm.
공무원을 보조해서 일하는 사무직 직원들이 많았어요.
And what does that mean?
어떤 부분이요? 공무원들을 보조하는
보조하는.
보조하는
Yeah.
도와준다는 말이에요.
Oh, okay.
네. 그러니까 진짜 똑같은 공무원 일을 하는 건 아닌데
Uh-huh.
그 공무원이 하는 일을 옆에서 도와주는 일이죠.
Oh, that makes sense.
네네.
Yeah.
근데 뭐 공무원들이 하는 일이랑 많이 비슷하긴 했어요. 제가 했던 일은.
Mm-hmm.
네. 그래서 그런 일자리가 있으니까 태웅이 너도 그런 일자리 생기면 공고가 나오면
Right.
여기서 사람을 뽑습니다. 이렇게 나오면 너도 지원해라.
Yeah. And
이거
at that
많은
point,
사람
oh, sorry. At that point, you already had experience because you had been there for your whole civil service, right?
네. 조금 비슷했어요. 조금.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it would give you an advantage in the
그렇죠,
application
그렇죠.
process. Yeah.
네네. 환경은 익숙하니까.
Yeah.
네. 아무튼
네.
그래서 일자리가 나면 많은 사람들이 그 일자리가 있는 줄도 몰라서 많이 지원을 안 하니까
Mm-hmm.
너 자리 나오면 기다렸다가 지원해라 이렇게 했거든요.
Yeah.
네, 그래서 지원을 했는데 비록 제가 그곳에서 대체 군 생활을 했지만 그래도 저도 똑같이 그 서류 내고 그리고 또 면접도 보고
Mm-hmm.
네, 그렇게 해서 합격을 했죠.
Right. And was
네.
there also, so there was the application process, but was there also an interview process?
있었어요.
Okay. What did that look like?
저는 그래서 가서 서류를 통과하고
Mhm.
가서 일단 뭐 왜 이 일을 하고 싶냐, 잘할 수 있냐
Uh-huh.
그런 거 물어보고 그리고 그 다음에는 뭘 했냐면 그때 되게 긴장됐었는데 아무래도 사무실에서 하는 일이니까 그 사무직들이 많이 쓰는 프로그램을 잘 다룰 수 있어야 하잖아요.
Right.
그래서 어떤 그곳에서 많이 자주 보이는 서류를 저한테 주고 그 서류 양식을 그 오피스 프로그램 2가지로 똑같이 만들어 보라고 했었어요.
Huh. From scratch.
네.
Okay.
네. 근데 막 그렇게 엄청 복잡한 건 아니었어요.
Oh, okay. But
그냥
like,
뭐 네.
is that something that you that you had to do as part of the work, or was it just sort of a random test?
연관이 있었던 것 같아요.
Oh, okay.
네.
Yeah.
네. 근데 뭐 똑같이 그 테스트를 비슷하게 일하면서 하진 않았는데
Uh-huh.
근데 그 일을 직접 할 때는
Mm-hmm.
그때 테스트 때 봤던 그 오피스 프로그램들을 뭐 항상 사용했으니까.
Well, that makes sense. So that was just a way of saying, can you actually, do you know your way around the software that they use? Yeah.
그쵸.
Yeah, that's fair.
네. 그러니까 뭐 엑셀 같은 거.
Yeah. Cool.
네.
Yeah.
그래서 그런 경험이 저한테는 그런 사무직 일자리를 뽑기 위한 그 채용 과정 그거를 해본 경험은 유일한 것 같아요.
Yeah. Cool.
네.
Yeah. Yeah, I did end up having an office job based on an actual interview back before programming, but it was still through the temporary work agency. And it was the same type of secretarial work. It just happened to be that they needed someone to work full time and not on a short contract basis. But they still contact the temp agency because they were familiar with the temp agency, and they said, "Do you have anyone who might be interested in something that's full time?"
오.
So then I had to go to the place and actually do an interview. Usually for the temp agency, if it was just like a few days or a few weeks, they wouldn't even do an interview. They would just send you there and you would do the receptionist work or the typing work or whatever it was for a bit, and then you'd be done. But because this was full time, and I ended up staying there for a year and a half maybe. So they wanted to make sure that I would be a good fit for what they needed.
네.
Yeah.
긴장 안 되셨나요?
I was really nervous, not so much about answering questions about the work because the work was very straightforward, but
네.
because they asked me, how much do you want to earn? And I was like, as much as
그래요?
possible, but I couldn't say that. So I
네.
just had to say a number. And I thought that was really scary.
아, 그랬구나.
Yeah.
어, 저는 그런 모든 과정이 다 제가 얼마를 받을지 알고 지원을 했기 때문에.
Right.
네. 근데, 저는 뭐 유튜브 하고, 뭐 한국어, 뭐 선생님, 뭐 프리랜싱 이렇게 많이 하니까,
Right.
그 요즘에 진짜 제 또래가 하는 말 그대로 진짜 한국 회사들의 그 취직하는 과정을 제가 직접 겪어보진 못해서 잘 모르는데,
Yeah.
그런 회사에서 일하는 친구들 얘기를 들어보면
hmm
실제로 그런 경우가 있다고 하더라고요.
Okay.
네,
Even in
면접
Korea.
보러
Yeah.
네네 지금도
Yeah.
면접 보러 가서 그 혹시 그 회사 측에서
Yeah.
혹시 이 일자리를 그 갖고 이 일을 하는데 좀 확신이 없으면 연봉을 그러니까 1년에 얼마 받는지
Right.
그 돈을 좀 더 올려줄 수도 있다 이렇게 얘기를 하는 경우가 있다고 하더라고요.
Wow. Yeah, it's very common in the US. Like they'll probably have an idea of the range that they want to pay someone, and then they might ask you, what do you expect your salary to be, or what would you like your salary to be? And then you have to hope that you're in their range and hope that you know, I don't know. It's really, I find it very uncomfortable.
그래요?
Yeah.
오케이, 알겠습니다. 또 생각나는 질문이 있는데, 잠깐만 아까 그 했던 얘기를 돌아보면 그 템프 에이전시라고 했잖아요.
hmm
그게 그 회사의 이름이에요? 아니면 그런 비슷한 것들을 전부 말하는 말이에요?
It's a category. Like there are many different temporary temp agencies that will have different names. So one that I used in Norway a long time ago was Adecco, which I think is an international one that exists in many places. But it's like a category, a type of agency that there will be many different companies that do the same thing or a similar thing.
아, 그렇구나.
Mhm.
네, 알겠습니다. 궁금증이 해결됐습니다. 네. 그래서 카트리나의 경우는 그렇게 템프 에이전시를 통해서 사무직 일을 좀 했었고,
Yep.
그리고 또 지난번에 저랑 얘기할 때 했던 얘기는 그 지난번에 저랑 따로 했던 얘기에서 그 세크리터리 일을 하다가 카트리나가 코딩을 업무에 사용해 봤다고 하지 않았어요?
Sort of. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So actually once when I was working as a secretary, this was actually the place where I was working full time for like a year and a half.
네.
Every week the people I worked for would come and ask me questions based on spreadsheets. So there were spreadsheets with lots of things, lots of data in them, and they would come and ask me, "Oh, can you tell me, you know, I can't even remember what the questions were. It's a long time ago. But can you figure out how much and how many and whatever based on these spreadsheets?" And so I would always, like every week, I would have to do different filtering and lookups and whatever and figure out the answer to those questions. And at some point, I was like, seriously, I should just make it easy for them to do it themselves. And so I didn't. I mean, this was what year was this? This was maybe. Oh, this was 2001. I remember because the 9/11 terrorist accident happened in the U.S. while I was at work. So I remember that vividly, and that was in 2001. So anyway, I went to the bookstore and bought paper books about how to make a system, like an interface, where you could upload an Excel spreadsheet and it would import the data into a database that you had to make yourself. But then you can make an interface so that they could easily like just push a button and get the question asked. Like how should I say this? I would pre-program so that if they push a button, it would go find the answer to a specific question. And so I just made a system where it would like upload the data. It had the database, and then they could push different buttons to get the answers they wanted. And at that point, I didn't even realize that was programming. It was just like I was just solving a problem at work as a secretary. I was like, this is inconvenient and inefficient, and it should be better. And so I found a way to make it more efficient.
와, 그게 요즘 자주 보이는 단어인데 인터넷에서 업무 자동화죠.
업무 meaning like the thing that I'm responsible for. But what's the second part of the word?
아, 네, 업무는 그냥 내가 해야 하는 일이고 회사에서 해야 하는 일이고 그 자동화예요. 자동으로 만들다.
Oh yeah, automating?
맞아요.
Yeah.
업무 자동화.
Yeah, work automation. Yep. Yeah, that's totally it. And so I did this not knowing that that's what programming is. I mean, a big part of programming is making it possible to do a thing the same way over and over and over again. Right?
업무 자동화를 혼자 발명했네요.
I guess.
와, 그러면 진짜 S급 직원이다.
Well, I guess I'm lazy. I think the true motivation
다르죠.
is that I'm a little bit lazy and I wanted things to just work better.
그래도 진짜 귀찮아서 그냥 일을 천천히 하는 사람도 있잖아요.
That's true.
네. 와. 좋습니다. 진짜 인상적인 일화고요. 프로그래머가 되기 전에 이미 프로그래밍을 했고.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that programming was a good solution for me as a job. Like in terms of work, programming is a good job for me because I like to solve that type of problems. Like I was already drawn to automating annoying tasks or making things work more easily or making something be less manual work. So in that sense, even though I had never made the connection, it makes sense that I would enjoy programming when I started learning it.
오케이, 좋아요. 그러면은 이제 사무직 다음 페이지로 넘어가 볼까요?
Okay.
네. 프로그래밍 어떻게 해서 첫 프로그래머 일을 찾게 됐는지
Yeah.
얘기 해볼까요?
Yeah, so I didn't even study programming at university. When I was 25, I realized that my life wasn't really going anywhere. Like I could do all the secretarial work you want and it's not going to be a career for me. And so I got kind of sick of it. And I was like, well, if I want a real job, I need to go get a university degree. And so I did, but I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted a university degree that would be good enough to get a proper job, something that's kind of interesting or useful. And so
한국인 같은데?
Yeah, totally. And so I picked biology kind of on a whim. I was like, I'll just get a degree in molecular biology and biochemistry, and then probably I can work in a lab the rest of my life, and that's good. I don't have to be an amazing scientist. I can just like have a regular job, 9 to 5, working in a lab. But during while I was at university, I took a math class that had some programming. I took some programming classes just for fun, and I realized that I really enjoyed it. So when I finished my degree in biology, I never actually used it for anything. I never went to work in a lab. I just started doing programming work first for friends, freelance. Like people would ask me to fix something for them, and I would do that. And then we moved to the U.S. So I studied in Norway, but we moved to the U.S. in 2007, I think, 2006 or 2007, somewhere around there. And of course, at this point, I didn't know anyone. I wasn't a very good programmer. I really had no idea how to go about finding work. So I did a search on Google Maps close to where I lived, close to where my apartment was, and was like, web design or
웹 디자인.
web design or web development. I think it was web development.
아, 네.
Because I wasn't a designer by any means. Like I could do the code piece, but not the design piece. And there was someone like 2 blocks away from my house. So I just walked there and I knocked on their door and said, "Hey, do you need help?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." He had like a 6-month backlog of client work that he was so behind on. And so he was like, "Oh, I'll pay you, I don't know how much it was, this much an hour to help me clear the backlog." And so I did that for a while, for a few months, and then we cleared his backlog, and then I needed a different job. So I did the same thing again. I expanded my search and was like, tech companies near my house on Google Maps.
네.
And I found a company that seemed kind of interesting. And so I just went there and I knocked on their door and I said, "Hey, do you guys need any help in your tech department?" And the woman who answered the door wasn't even in the tech department. And she was so confused. And she just looked at me and she was like, "Wait a second, let me find someone you can talk to." And this was at the end of the day, so people were getting off work, and so there was someone in the tech department. I can't remember if it was like the VP of engineering or someone who was coming off work, and she was like, "Okay, you can walk me to my car, and we'll talk." And so I walked. So we were on the 12th floor, and we took the elevator down, and I walked her to her car. And when she got to her car, she said, "Okay, come in tomorrow morning and bring your resume." So the next morning I got an interview at the company, brought my resume, and I had an interview with the head of IT who looked at my resume and said, "Oh, you have a degree in molecular biology and biochemistry. You must be pretty smart."
도움이 됐네요, 그것도.
Yeah, exactly. I totally got a good use out of that university degree. And so she hired me again at just, some number of dollars per hour to do kind of random work, assistant type work in the tech department. So quality assurance, testing, new changes that would go out, not necessarily programming work directly, but within a few months, within like 3 months, I was doing programming full time, and she changed my contract to be like a full-time yearly salary, and I was on the actual programming team by then. And I stayed there for three years. So that's when I actually learned how to become a programmer, was on the job at this company for 3 years where I was working with programmers, and they would teach me things, and then I would also go and read books. Like I would be frustrated about something at work, and I would go find a book about how to do that better, and I would do it better, learn how to do it better.
아니, 좀 스스로 운이 좋다고 생각하는 편이에요?
Yeah, definitely. But also, it's like you can knock on doors, and sometimes they won't need anything. And of course, in 2007, times were different, so it's not going to work now.
그쵸?
Right? But it totally was a time where a lot of things were kind of in flux, and it worked fine. And in other types of situations, so when I moved to Norway in, when was it? 2010? So after I finished working at this company in the US, we moved back to Norway. And again, I didn't know anybody. I still didn't have a degree in programming, but I knew a lot more programming. I like there were parts of programming that I actually cared more about. And so what I did was I went to programming meetups. And so there was a meetup for a language that I found interesting, and I had done a little bit with, and I liked the way that people who worked in that language, I liked the way that they talked about doing good work and writing code that other people can understand, and making it easier to write code that doesn't have a lot of errors and bugs, or makes it easier to find bugs quickly, etc. And so I thought that was really interesting. So I went to a programming meetup that was specifically for people who are in that community. And the next day I got 2 phone calls from 2 different companies that had people at that meetup and said, "Hey, do you want to come interview here?"
네.
Yeah. So I interviewed at both places and got a job offer at one of them.
와. 와, 그러니까 진짜 요즘에 흔히 생각하는 막 그 자기소개서 막 서류랑 막 이런 걸 준비해서 그 회사에 지원하고 그런 거랑은 얘기가 엄청 다르네요.
Yeah, it is really different. And I think that even now, it would be a better approach to go get to know people who are interested in some of the same topics that you are and figure out if their companies are hiring. And even just getting to know people when you don't need a job is really great. Like getting to know
그렇죠.
them, meet interesting people, have interesting conversations, do side projects that that you do just for fun. I remember going to a meetup and doing a competition with another programmer that I had known just through these meetups. Like this wasn't someone I knew as a friend. It wasn't someone that I knew from work. It was just he had also been at some of the same meetups, and we did we just paired up for a competition, and we
네.
won, and it was super
우와.
fun. And now, like 10 years, this is what 10, 12 years later, he's running a company, and he said, "Oh, and if you need a job, let me know." And it's like 10, 12 years later, I wasn't thinking, oh, he might be able to get me a job. It was just a fun thing to do. A person who's cool, who's fun to talk to, who is interested in some of the same things as me. And then a bunch of years later, it turns out like if I actually need a job right now, he'd hire me in a second.
아니 이게 되게 상관없을 것 같은 이야기인데
Yeah.
그 약간 인디 뮤지션들 얘기랑 좀 비슷한 부분이 많은 것 같아요.
Really, I don't actually know. I mean, despite being married to an indie musician, I don't know a lot
맞네.
of. I don't know a lot about that culture.
아니 왜냐면 이게 또 모든 경우는 아닌데
Uh-huh.
제가 좋아하는 그 한국에 있는 뭐 힙합 아티스트 뭐 힙합 레이블 뭐 크루가 있거든요 하나가.
Okay.
네 근데 그 크루가 막 뭐 랩하는 사람도 있고 뭐 비트 프로듀싱 하는 사람도 있고 뭐 뮤직비디오 만드는 사람도 있고 막 뭐 여러 그 다양한 분야의 사람들이 모인 팀인데
Right.
근데 사람들이 그러니까 그냥 이제 막 그 처음 음악을 시작하고 막 혼자 음악을 하는 사람들이 그 크루에 되게 들어가고 싶어 해요.
Right.
그리고 막 문의도 되게 많이 하고 막 이런 Q&A 같은 거 할 때 거기 들어가려면 어떻게 해야 하나요? 막 그런 질문도 많이 하거든요.
Yeah.
근데 제가 그 사람들이 그 질문에 답한 거를 본 기억이 있는데 우리도 그 어떤 큰 막 대형 레이블, 대형 크루에 들어가려고 막 준비해서 막 면접 보고 한 게 아니다.
Right.
그냥 우리도 그냥 우리 주위에 있는 사람 나 비트 만드는데 랩할 사람 없나? 이렇게 해서 그냥 고만고만한 사람들끼리 찾아서
Yeah.
그 커뮤니티 그 아까 말한 미트업처럼 막 관심사가 맞아서 모임을 만들었고 뭐 그러다 보니까 각자 이제 좀 실력이 생겨서
Right.
또 커지고 하다 보니 이렇게 큰 모임이 됐다는 거예요.
Yeah. That makes sense.
예.
Yeah.
좀 비슷한 부분이 있는 것 같아요.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you like, I've gone to so many meetups. I can tell you there are thousands of people who didn't hire me based on going to a meetup.
그렇죠.
Right.
네.
But from my perspective, it's like, oh, I went to a meetup and I needed a job and somebody called me and now I have a job. Like yeah, I'm super, super lucky and the timing was right. And, but also I have put myself in situations where I meet interesting people. And so I feel like I may be optimized for luck a little bit. Like I made it possible for me to be more lucky.
오, 그거 그냥 하나의 풀 에피소드로 삼아도 좋을 토픽인 것 같아요.
Yeah.
예.
Yeah.
그 운에 관해서.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that.
예, 좋을 것 같아요, 그거.
Yeah.
아무튼 그렇게 그 좀 운이 좋을 수 있는 상황을 극대화시킨 거네요, 카트리나가.
Yeah. So I feel like when I started programming and And for the beginning of my programming career, that's how I approached finding work. Is I would go and ask for work, like I would just
네.
ask if they needed help, or I would go and meet people, and then based on that, on like there would be some sort of interesting connection, and somebody would need something that clearly I cared about, and so I would at least get the opportunity to have a conversation with them. Like it might not be, oh, you seem like the kind of person that should work here. It was often more like there were more steps in between, but it was like, let's at least have a conversation about whether or not you would want to work here, or if we have a type of position that would be a good fit for you.
그렇게 프로그래머로서 일자리를 찾았던 거는 그 초반은 그냥 무슨 카카오 맵, 구글 맵에서 맛집 찾듯이 집 근처에 있는 회사 찾아서 가서 뭐 일 필요하냐, 일할 사람 필요하냐 이렇게 해서 일을 찾은 것들이었고 네, 그 이후에 노르웨이로 돌아가서는 로컬이었나요? 로컬 미덕?
Yeah, it was just people in the same city.
그쵸.
Yeah.
그런 진짜 오프라인 네트워크를 가져서
Yeah.
그리고 또 근데 그때 궁금한 게 카트리나가 거기서 약간 나 일자리 필요한 사람이야 이렇게 막 어필하지 않았죠?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't say that I needed work, but I did say that I had recently moved back from the States, and so I'm casually starting to look. Yeah. But I wasn't like, oh, please.
그렇죠.
Yeah.
아무튼 그래서 되게 그 카트리나가 관심 있는 거를 되게 많이 나눴고.
Yeah.
되게 자연스럽게. 네.
Actually, when I think about it, the rest of my career was kind of more like that, except that so what happened was I started speaking at conferences. I think I mentioned this at the beginning. I started speaking at conferences. I would prepare a talk. I would stand on stage in front of, it might be 100 people or 180 people or, 1,000 or 2,000 people, but different conferences in different countries. And over time, people had seen me speak. They knew that I had sort of the way I had been thinking about a certain topic, or they would, I would have met them at a conference and they would have, we would start chatting outside, like in the hallway between talks. And so I would get to know people, and often it was the same people at a lot of these conferences. And so after having met them a few times, maybe we would have done some programming just for fun together. Sometimes they would say, hey, we're looking for someone, and I think you might be a good fit. Can we talk? And so then that's how I got most of the rest of my jobs after I started speaking.
그런 식으로 결국 GitHub까지 간 거죠.
Basically, yeah, there was someone who was working at GitHub. Actually, I knew quite a lot of people who worked at GitHub who went to conferences. But there was one person who sent me a text message. He said, there's an opening on a team, and I think you should apply for it. So he didn't say, it wasn't even his team. And he didn't say, here, can we hire you? He said, this is a team that needs someone, and I think the things that you care about and the things that you talk about suggest that you might be a good fit for that team. And so based on that, I put together my resume and I applied. And then he probably, I actually didn't ask him, he probably went and talked to the hiring manager and said, hey, you should check out this person, because I got an interview immediately. And then the whole process took a while because there was all sorts of things internally that happened at GitHub that made the process slow down. Like they had a hiring freeze. I can't remember why, but the big boss said nobody can be hired for a while because we're trying to figure out something internally. And so everything was put on hold. And then they did a reorganization. So before there were these departments, and then they reorged, and now it's different departments. And the team that I was applying to no longer existed after the reorg. It was gone. but the same people existed, and there was now a different team that had some overlap with the old team, and it was the same hiring manager, the manager who was looking for someone to hire. And so even though the job was a little bit different, he came back to me and said, okay, can we kind of readjust, and are you interested in applying for this position that's now a little bit different? And so I was super interested. It still sounded interested, and so I went ahead but it ended up taking a while because of all of these internal changes and things.
아, 얼마나 걸렸어요?
5 months. And 11 interviews.
11번.
Yeah. I don't think it's anything like that. This is a long time ago. And so they've, changed all their processes. They were acquired by Microsoft. There are all sorts of things that are now have much clearer systems. And so I can't imagine that anyone would wait 5 months now to, between the start of their interview process or application process and the end. Like that probably doesn't ever happen anymore.
좋습니다. 그러니까 다시 한번 정리를 해보면 첫 번째 페이즈 그냥 밥집 찾듯이 지도에서 찾아가서 일자리를 구하던 때에서 그렇게 찾은 회사가 좀 운이 많이 좋았던 것 같아요. 거기서 엄청 많이 가르쳐주고 그 카트리나의 실력을 높여줬잖아요.
Yeah, absolutely.
네, 그렇게 한번 점프를 해서 그 노르웨이로 돌아간 이후에는 그 미드업에서 좀 어떻게 보면 그 사람들이랑 레벨이 맞아서 대화가 통했다는 거잖아요. 네, 그래서 카트리나의 존재를 잘 알게 하고 또 거기서부터 일자리를 찾았고 근데 또 거기서 3페이지로 점프를 하는 게 좀 갑자기 확 뛰는 것처럼 보이는데 카트리나
Yeah, it wasn't actually a big jump because it's while I was working at that company in Norway that I went to my first conference and I started meeting people. And so at that conference, even though I wasn't speaking, the first time I went to a conference, like it never occurred to me that I would ever speak at a conference. That seemed like a terrifying thing.
그거를
Yeah.
그러니까 방금까지 그냥 아까까지 그냥 얘기만 들은 사람은
Yeah.
갑자기 강연을 한다고?
Yeah.
그렇게 들릴 수 있거든요.
Yeah.
그래서 근데 우리가 지금 한 1시간 정도 얘기를 했기 때문에
Yep.
다음번에 그 강연자로서 쓰는 경험을 에피소드 하나로 또 따로 빼는 게 어때요?
Yeah, let's do that.
그렇죠. 어떻게 해서 사실 우리들은 일반적으로 생각하면 그런 강연회에서 그 무대에 서서 강연하는 사람들은 진짜 다른 사람들 같고
Oh, yeah, no.
진짜 특별할 것 같은데
I mean, there are definitely some people who are very special and very talented and like
당연하죠.
at a
그쵸.
different level, but a lot of us are just totally normal people who happen to be on stage.
뭐 그건 카트리나의 생각이고요.
Yeah. No, but I'm actually quite serious about it. I have a friend, and she once went to a conference as a participant. She had never spoken at a conference before. And she went to a conference, and there was someone who did a talk, and it was actually it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. And she was like, I could do this. And she was like, so she started doing talks at conferences, and now, like recently, somebody paid to have her go from the US to, I think, Berlin, and they paid her lots of money to stand on a ginormous stage and do a talk about programming. Oh, yeah. I mean, she's been doing it for over a decade now for sure, but the beginning was just seeing someone on stage who did kind of a not great talk.
근데 아까 제가 말한 뉘앙스가 잘못 전달된 것 같아요. 그러니까 카트리나가 방금 한 얘기도 굉장히 의미 있는 이야기인데, 그러니까 카트리나는 아까 본인 자기 가리키면서 보통 사람이라고 했잖아요.
Yeah, 100%.
근데 누군가의 눈에는 카트리나도 보통 사람이 아닙니다.
Well, thank you. I guess.
아니, 그런 의미였어요.
Yeah. No, but I. Oh, yeah. I guess. but I am a totally normal person, and a lot of other totally normal people also give talks. So I
네.
I do believe that I'm right and you're wrong.
네, 겸손하십니다. 그러면 그러면 오늘 그 구직, 그러니까 직업을 구한다, 일을 구한다, 구직 이야기는 뭐 이쯤에서 마무리를 해볼까요?
hmm
네.
I feel like we talked about me the whole time, and there's
네.
a ton of interesting stuff that we should talk about from you. But maybe we can do that in a different episode.
음.
음.
네, 근데 저는 이제 그 할 수 있는 경험, 얘기할 수 있는 경험이 그렇게 남은 게 많지 않아서 뭐 기껏해야 그 한국어 선생님 그 해외로 파견 나가는 거 그 과정 뭐 하나밖에 없거든요.
Yeah, but that's an interesting one. We'll see.
그런가?
Maybe we'll find a way to
네.
include it at some point.
네네.
Yeah.
뭐 다음에 한번 기회가 되면 얘기해 봅시다.
Yeah.
네. 그러면 그 사실 제가 좀 아쉬운 부분이 있는 주제예요.
Uh-huh.
왜냐면 그 제가 친구들로부터 들은 많은 그 한국의 그 취업 과정 얘기가 언뜻 들으면 진짜 재밌는 것들이 많았거든요.
Yeah.
그렇게 연봉 협상을 하는 것도 있었고, 그리고 듣기로는 그 취업 면접이 그냥 하루 가서 하루 이야기하는 면접이 아니라 막 1박 2일 그 1박 2일 단체로 합숙을 하면서
Right.
거기서 막 그 하루 종일 뭐 어떤 프로그램 이런 프로그램을 하면서 막 토론하고 막 그 활동을 하는 면접도 있다고 하더라고요.
Yeah. Huh. So could you invite them onto your All Things Korean podcast? I think that would be fun to hear about.
네, 지금 부를 수 있는 사람이라면 부르겠습니다. 뭐 근데 그 헤어진 전 여자친구라던가 그런 사람들은 부를 수가 없어서 제가
Yep.
네네. 아무튼 가능한 부르겠습니다. 참 이게 슬픈 얘기인데 웃으면서 하니까 좀 그렇네요. 네.
My apologies.
네, 괜찮습니다. 다 시간이 지난 이야기라. 아무튼 그러면은 이번 에피소드는 여기서 마무리를 해볼까요?
Yep.
네. 지금까지 이번 시간에는 카트리나와 저의 몇 안 되는 직업을 찾는 과정, 또 이렇게 저렇게도 일자리를 구한 경험, 그런 것들에 대해서 얘기를 많이 나눠봤습니다. 카트리나는 또 8월에 또 흥미로운 주제로 돌아오겠습니다. 그러면 지금까지 얘기 재미있게 들어주셨으면 좋겠고요. 한국어로 그리고 영어로 얘기하는 반반 팟캐스트 하프앤하프의 정태웅이었습니다. 감사합니다.
And I'm Katrina, and you've been listening to Half and Half. Thank you.